Her short life was remembered not for triumph but for suffering. Princess Margarita Teresa of Spain was said to be rotting alive, her body cursed by sickness that no doctor could cure. Servants and courtiers feared being near her, driven away by a stench that perfume could never hide. This wasn't just personal tragedy. It was the curse of a royal bloodline destroying itself from within. Here is the tragic story of Princess Margarita Teresa. At only 19 years old, she carried an odor so powerful that even the finest perfumes in Europe could not mask it. This was no ordinary affliction. It was the living symbol of a dynasty slowly destroying itself from within. The Alcazar was more than just a palace. It was the beating heart of Spanish power. Built centuries earlier as a fortress by Moorish rulers, it had been transformed into a royal residence at the very center of Madrid. From its towering stone walls, Spain had been governed at the height of its empire, when gold and silver flowed from the Americas and kings ruled vast territories across Europe and beyond. Inside, its chambers glittered with golden icons, tapestries, and the masterpieces of Diego Velázquez. The Alcazar wasn't just a home, it was the symbol of Spanish might. It was where ambassadors bowed, treaties were signed, and the world expected to see the splendor of Europe's greatest dynasty. So when whispers spread that a princess within these walls carried a smell so foul that courtiers gagged, the shame wasn't only personal, it was political. The very palace that symbolized Spain's glory now reeked of its decline. But inside those walls, the family's secrets were impossible to ignore. Generations of inbreeding, uncles marrying nieces, cousins marrying cousins, had twisted the bloodline. Courtiers had once admired the Habsburg look, the pronounced jaw, the long lips, the noble profile. But now, those same traits had grown monstrous, and it wasn't just appearances, it crippled their ability to rule. Kings struggled with constant illness, seizures, and infertility. Charles II, Margarita's younger brother, could barely speak clearly, his oversized tongue garbling his words. He needed help just to walk and stand during ceremonies, yet he was expected to carry the weight of an empire. His mother, Queen Mariana, often had to act as the true ruler in his place. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment to let me know where you're watching from. Earlier kings had also shown signs of decline. Philip IV, their father, suffered deep depression and exhaustion, leaving ministers to make decisions as the empire slipped into crisis. And the Austrian branch of the family faced similar troubles. Emperors plagued by madness, weakness, or early death. What had once been the dynasty that conquered half the known world was now producing rulers too frail to govern, too sick to command, and too infertile to secure the future. And the princess, with her overpowering stench, became the court's cruel reminder. Perfume masters worked day and night to craft remedies: rosemary, thyme, rosewater, oils mixed into pastes and powders. She bathed constantly. She wore layers of powder on her skin. Nothing worked. And beneath those powders, her skin told its own story. Her complexion had grown pale and almost translucent, with veins faintly visible beneath the surface. Patches of irritation flared from endless baths and harsh concoctions, leaving her cheeks raw beneath the makeup. Courtiers whispered that up close her skin seemed waxy, stretched thin, as if the very foundation of her health was crumbling. From a distance, she looked every bit the glittering princess. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. "The princess approaches," murmured ladies-in-waiting, rushing to spray perfume in the air. Ambassadors wrote home to their kings, describing not just politics but the frailty of Spain's royals. It wasn't only inside the palace. At state dinners, scented cloths were dabbed near her chair. Herbs burned under the table. During plays and operas, attendants sprayed perfumes through the theater, though nobles still shifted uncomfortably, their fans fluttering faster as the scent crept through the rows. And when she attended receptions or dances, noblemen bowed, but few lingered close. Guests shuffled their positions, creating a circle of empty space around her. The polite fiction of court life, silks, music, jeweled crowns, could not cover the truth. It was a humiliation Spain could not afford. Across the Pyrenees, King Louis XIV of France read every report with cold calculation. He had no sympathy for the young princess. Her suffering was leverage. Every defect in the Spanish line was a weapon at the diplomatic table. If Spain's heirs were too weak to rule, France could push its own claim. If a Spanish princess married into French blood, the Bourbons might one day inherit Spain outright. That was exactly his plan. In 1666, Princess Margarita Teresa's father, King Philip IV of Spain, arranged her marriage to Louis, the Grand Dauphin of France, the eldest son of King Louis XIV. The match bound France and Spain together, but everyone whispered the same fear. Her health was already failing. Louis XIV didn't need her to thrive. He only needed the marriage to secure his family's future claim to the Spanish crown. And yet, behind the gossip was tragedy. Servants pitied the young woman, whispering that it wasn't her fault, but her bloodline's curse. Physicians muttered that it was the price of blood purity, a veiled way of saying this was the cost of centuries of incestuous marriages. Even Diego Velázquez, Spain's greatest court painter, saw it. For decades, he had painted the Habsburgs to look powerful and royal. Proud kings, glittering queens, radiant children. But when he looked upon the princess, he could no longer hide the truth. His brush that once exalted their grandeur now revealed only their sorrow and decline. Her suffering was not unique. It was only the beginning. In another wing of the palace, her younger brother, Prince Carlos, the fragile heir to Spain, was already displaying symptoms far worse. At barely 12 years old, he looked years younger than his age. His jaw jutted forward, his tongue oversized, his steps unsteady from rickets. And like his sister, courtiers whispered about his smell, a sickly odor from infections and failing health. No perfume could mask it for long. To see the boy was to see the dynasty's curse made flesh. Carlos II, later called the Bewitched, was not only sickly in body. His condition threatened Spain's survival. He struggled to learn the basics, falling behind boys half his age. Some days he could not read at all, drifting off in exhaustion during lessons. Counselors feared he lacked the strength to govern, but darker whispers haunted the court. Could he ever produce an heir? Doctors warned his body was too weak, his fertility hopeless. Spain's empire stretched across oceans, but its future now rested on a boy too feeble to rule and too fragile to continue the bloodline. By 12, he was already seen as unfit to rule. Yet he was the only heir Spain had left. Doctors tried everything: exotic herbs, animal parts, bloodletting rituals, endless prayers. Priests whispered of curses. Alchemists promised miracles. Nothing changed. The royal line was crumbling, one child at a time. When Carlos II came of age, his marriage was meant to save Spain. In 1679, he wed Maria Luisa of Orleans, niece of the French king. The court pinned all its hopes on this union. If Maria Luisa could bear him a healthy son, the dynasty might continue. And if the marriage bound Spain closer to France, perhaps it would buy time against its powerful neighbor. In one fragile wedding, Spain hoped to secure both an heir for the throne and a shield against war. But whispers already spread. Carlos looked far too weak for either task. At the wedding itself, the whispers grew louder. The king could barely stand, needing attendants to hold him upright. His vows came out in a high-pitched stammer, his tongue tripping over the words. The congregation shifted uncomfortably, noblemen staring at the floor. Some guests forced polite smiles, clapping dutifully, but the mood was uneasy. French envoys watched closely, noting every falter. Spanish nobles exchanged anxious glances. Even the bride, Maria Luisa, was said to have wept bitterly upon first meeting her husband. It was less a celebration and more a quiet reckoning. Spain had unveiled its king before Europe, and instead of strength and majesty, the world saw weakness and decline. Years passed. No child came. The court turned desperate. Foreign doctors were summoned. Remedies grew more bizarre, even rituals bathing the king's loins in animal blood. Nothing worked. Maria Luisa died young, and his second wife, Mariana of Neuburg, also failed to bear a child. The dynasty's line was at its breaking point. Meanwhile, Europe watched like vultures. France, Austria, and other powers prepared for the inevitable. The extinction of Spain's kings. By the late 1600s, the court had become a theater of decline. The princess with the unbearable stench. The king too weak to father an heir. And courtiers whispering that the proudest dynasty in Europe was unraveling. In 1700, Carlos II died at only 39 years old. His body, ravaged by illness, shocked even his physicians. His heart was the size of a peppercorn. His lungs decayed. His body nearly bloodless. The dynasty ended with him. The Habsburgs' obsession with pure blood had destroyed them from within. Their portraits still hang today. Long jaws, pale skin, sunken eyes, haunting reminders of what happens when politics defies nature. And for centuries, one detail has lingered above all others. The princess whose stench silenced a royal court. Her odor was more than a medical mystery. It was the smell of a dying empire.